wonderful commercial real estate people. Welcome back to another great session of interesting topics that everybody needs to know in commercial real estate. Today we're going to be talking about cash bonds versus security, so bank guarantees or directors guarantees, that sort of thing. So this one's going to be quite a quick one. I've just done a little bit of information for you, but this is vital information that you need to know when you're purchasing commercial real estate. What is better? What are the pros and cons of bank guarantees, personal guarantees, and cash bonds? So which one is the best one to go for? Let's dive in and check that out. So security. So security, when you're purchasing a commercial property, the security would basically be in the format of one of those bonds that I mentioned. And what are you looking for? What do you need to look out for? You know, what do you need to ask for when looking at or negotiating leases with a tenant, or a new lease, or renegotiating with an old tenant? Maybe you've bought the property and you've inherited the tenant and you're not too happy about what the guarantees are. So in this session, we're just going to drill down a little bit on cash versus bank guarantee versus personal guarantee. Okay, so it's a bit of a bonus session, and just to inform you on what's the best. So let's just break it down and go through them. Okay, what are the main types of security in commercial real estate? Like I mentioned, you've got the two most common types is cash security. So in other words, where they're actually paying you a portion of that rental, cash security. And I would say you always want 1 month for every year that you have on the lease. So if it's a 3-year lease, you got 3 months. Okay, with big businesses, you're never going to get a cash guarantee. If they're consortiums or ASX listed or something, generally it's going to be a bank guarantee. Okay, same applies for bank guarantee. This is a negotiation where you're asking them for a certain amount of guarantee for as a backstop. You can also get personal guarantees from directors of tenanted companies. So let's just dive in and see how they work. Let's start with a cash security. How does that work? Cash security is very, very straightforward. It's a deposit, typically 3 months, like I said, for a 3-year. Generally, in your smaller tenancies, you'd get the cash bonds. And if it's 5-year, I would ask 5 months. And what do you use this for? If the tenant defaults, the landlord can use the cash to cover the unpaid rent or damages. Now, you've also got a make good clause, or you should have make good clause in your lease. Now I'm divulging a little bit, going down a little bit of a rabbit hole over here, but be careful not to mix the two. Now, often what happens is a cheeky tenant will get to the end of his lease and say, no, you've got a cash bond, I'm not going to pay for my last 3 months. Well, actually, it doesn't work like that. So you need to be very, 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 or your property managers need to be very strict about that and just say, no, that cash bond is to cover any make good that you have not done on your exit. So in other words, if they've got a make good clause where they've got to paint the building back to white and replace floors or whatever it is, that must come out of their make good clause. So in other words, that comes out of their budget, not yours. The bond would be, if they don't do that, you would use those funds for those make goods. So whatever needs to be made good, you use those funds to make good. So typically cash bond. But a lot of tenants say, oh no, you've got 3 months rent. That's just my last 3 months of rental that I don't have to pay. Be very careful with that. The other thing is unpaid rent. So in the duration of them being with you, if there is unpaid rent and then they do come back on track, you need to make sure that they pay that rent, although you might have used the cash bond, so that you're balancing out again. So if that is a default, they still need to pay that rent in order to make sure that your bond is back, that your float is full, if that makes sense. Okay, it's pretty straightforward, and you want the cash bond plus the GST And like I said, if the tenant defaults, then the landlord yourselves can use that for unpaid rental and damages. How does a personal guarantee work? Okay, so that's slightly different. A personal guarantee means that the directors of the tenanted company are personally liable if the business fails or if they fail to pay their rent. If the tenant defaults, the landlord can pursue the guarantors, so in other words, the personal guarantees and their personal assets. From my perspective, I don't like personal guarantees because it means that you have to go and pursue them through court of law. That's going to cost you. That's going to be a massive cost in legal fees. And if you haven't done your homework, if somebody's giving you a personal guarantee, generally I say, no thanks, I'd rather have the cash. Because a personal guarantee, directors often don't own anything in their own names. So clever business people would put everything that they own into entities, not into their own name. So if you're chasing a personal guarantee, you're chasing a director, often you're chasing a ghost. So we don't like personal guarantees. If you are going to accept personal guarantees, make sure that there are assets behind whoever's making the personal guarantee. Okay. It does sound like it's added protection for the landlord, and you'll find in large corporations, typically they would not agree to personal guarantees because they're liable for the large corporation, and if they're working for a large corporation, then why would they take on a personal guarantee? Unless it's the directors of the large corporations. And like I said, 9 times out of 10, those directors don't own anything. So it's air. Okay. Big companies, like I said, they prefer not to provide personal guarantees. You probably won't get that out of them. So it would be a little bit tricky to try and get a personal guarantee. Don't push it. I would say just accept it. Find another way. Bank guarantees, best way for big corporations. And cash is king. At the end of the day, cash is always king. So a lot of landlords would rely on that cash for the event of make good, which is great. Now, here's another tip. If you're going to take cash, make sure that you know exactly who is holding that cash and where it is. Likewise with your bank guarantees. Guys, I cannot stress enough how important it is to have, number one, the original bank guarantee kept in a very safe place. Keep it in a safe, in a file where you've got it that says bank guarantees, or give it to your property management company and insist that they scan it in and that they give you a copy, because I can tell you this is one of the biggest things that go amiss at the end of tenant's term. Bank guarantees go missing, personal guarantees go missing, cash bonds have not been taken into account in trust accounts or with agents. If you're taking that money, it should effectively go into a trust. By law, it should go into a trust account. You should not be earning interest on any funds that you're taking as a bond. Very important. A lot of people do take that, put it in, make a note about it, and 3 years later, they've forgotten about it. Okay, so it has to be documented and dealt with correctly. Okay, so what are the risks of having a personal guarantee? Like I mentioned earlier, landlords generally have less security, so you would have less security on a personal guarantee. If the tenant defaults, the landlord is limited to the amount of cash security that they can get out of that, and there's a legal battle that ensues to try and access that. Sometimes your legal battle is going to cost you more than what a 3-month personal guarantee is for a tenant for 50 or 100,000. It's really not worth it. Rather go the cash route. And often it's just not enough to cover whatever the losses are. So what is better? You tell me. Cash security or personal guarantee? Well, I've answered that 3 times. Okay. Very dependent on the tenant's financial strength. Do your homework. Do your due diligence. The tenant might appear to be financially very, very stable. However, the reality is often they're not. Okay. For high-risk tenants, personal guarantee provides a little extra layer of protection. Again, I'm going to say, even for a well-established business, I would prefer to go the cash security because you've got it in your hands, you've got it in your trust account, and that's what it is. Now, we haven't spoken much about bank guarantees. So I'm just going to throw in that bank guarantees, particularly on your bigger businesses, on your national businesses and that, you definitely want a bank guarantee. Look after that bank guarantee. Make sure that you scan it in, keep it under the name of the property or in a safe place that you know that you can access it. And often bank guarantees are for longer leases, 5 years, 10 years. A lot happens in 5 years. You know, people move, people die, people change jobs, offices, all sorts of things. So make sure that it is filed correctly. And if you've got property managers, that it's documented that they have the original bank guarantee. Because guys, at the end of the day, you are liable for that bank guarantee. Okay, they're going to come knocking on the door and they're going to say, hey, Mr. Owner of building XYZ, can we have our bank guarantee? And if you're not giving it back, that is money that they've put into the bank, and the bank is guaranteeing that they're going to pay it to you. So at the end of the day, you're responsible to pay it back to them at the end of the lease. So be aware of that. There's a little snippet of great insights, and this is a little bonus session. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.